Hi, I'm Kathy. At dinner, my brother joked I couldn't even afford a car. They handed me a folding chair near the bathroom, served me a separate meal like I was poor. No seat, no voice, no name on anything I'd built. But what they didn't know is that I paid for the house they were laughing in. They erased me from the photos, from the plans, from the future. So I called in my ride. And when my helicopter landed in the backyard, you should have seen their faces. What happens next isn't what you think. I wasn't even supposed to be at that table, not officially. Pearl called me late Thursday, voice bright like it always got when she was masking something. She said there'd be a family dinner on Sunday, just a casual catch-up, she claimed, but slipped up and mentioned the estate planning agenda. I played along, pretending I'd seen the email. After we hung up, I searched for it. Nothing in my inbox. She hadn't copied me. Again. I forwarded myself the chain when she sent it over, claiming it was a glitch. Everyone else was on it. Dexter, Pearl, their spouses, even the family lawyer's assistant. Subject line read, Crow Family Estate Planning, Key Contributors Only. Key Contributors. I sat there in my apartment staring at the screen, something heavy forming in my chest. Not heartbreak, just clarity. They didn't see me as key. Maybe they never had. Rowena caught me reading it when she walked in with coffee. She didn't ask. She never needed to. "You're not going, are you?" she asked after a beat. "I haven't decided," I said. She set the mug down gently, like the sound might tip me over. "Visibility isn't the same as value," she said, "but some people confuse the two." I didn't answer her right away, just stared at the kite-shaped pin sitting in my drawer, tucked under a pile of papers I hadn't touched in years. My father gave it to me when I was 9. I hadn't worn it since college. That night, I booked a flight to Charleston. The day before the dinner, I packed light. I picked an old cardigan, low heels, hair in a knot. Nothing flashy, no makeup, no jewelry but the kite pin. I left the jet grounded and took commercial. Rowena gave me a look when she saw the boarding pass. "You know you don't have to shrink yourself to fit their story." "I'm not shrinking," I said. "I just want to see what they think they're writing." She nodded once. "Just don't let them write over you." I arrived in Charleston the next afternoon. Autumn hadn't fully turned yet, but the air carried the faint warning of cold. The Crow estate looked exactly the same. White columns, trimmed hedges, as if pretending nothing inside had ever changed. Dexter's wife opened the door. She blinked, surprised. "Oh, I didn't realize you were still coming." I gave a smile that didn't reach anywhere. Neither did I. She ushered me in and gestured toward the dining room. I stopped at the threshold. The table was set like a photo shoot. Fine china, gold-rimmed glasses, name cards. Except my spot wasn't like the others. It was a folding chair, wobbly, scuffed, and squeezed next to the powder room door. Pearl walked by, placing a wine glass down. "That's yours." "Sorry, we ran out of chairs. It's a little unsteady, but no biggie, right?" I didn't argue, just nodded and took the seat, tucking my cardigan around me. No one else seemed to notice anything strange, maybe because they never had to. Dinner started casually enough. Dexter cracked jokes about the market. Mabel corrected him gently when he said non-fungible, wrong. Pearl passed bread like she was on camera. Someone asked me if I was still freelancing, like I hadn't just sold a company. "Or is that little tech thing finally turning a profit?" they added, chuckling. I said, "It's going okay," and passed the butter. The questions never came with curiosity, just enough concern to cover the condescension. The table was split, not just by glassware and linens, but by weight. Dexter and Pearl sat like anchors, voices loud, presence sprawling. I sat at the edge, figuratively and literally, holding silence like a napkin folded too tight. I watched as wine was poured for others and skipped over me. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask for anything. I simply looked at the seat I'd been given, next to the bathroom, in a room where my name didn't even make the email list, and I thought, they erased me before the meeting even began. I just hadn't realized. I let them. The wine hadn't even been served yet, and I already knew I didn't belong at that table. They started passing plates while I was still tucking my chair in, the one that creaked every time I shifted weight, still next to the bathroom, still unnoticed. Dishes of roasted lamb, garlic mashed potatoes, oysters, Rockefeller made their way around. I reached for a plate, and Pearl's hand caught mine lightly. No, no, yours is coming, she said. Mine? A few minutes later, the housekeeper came by and set down a bowl of salad, no dressing, and a thick piece of white bread with no butter. A bottle of water followed. Room temperature. I looked at her. She looked back, apologetic. They mentioned dietary restrictions, she whispered. I didn't have any. Across the table, Dexter lifted his glass. Figured you'd want the budget-friendly option, he said with that grin he always wore when he thought he was being charming. Pearl let out a loud laugh, too loud, like she was covering for him. Mabel chimed in softly. It's healthier anyway, dear. You've always had that plain taste. I didn't respond, not even a blink, just sat there with the bowl of rough lettuce and a slice of stale bread, while the rest of them sliced into butter-seared protein and clinked glasses of Pinot Noir. They didn't forget. They decided. Dessert was peach cobbler, which smelled like childhood and Sunday nights, but mine never came. Everyone else had theirs halfway scraped clean when Dexter clapped his hands once and said, Okay, family business time. He reached under the table and pulled out a leather-bound binder, flipped it open like he was reading names off a will. We've been thinking, he said, about how to make sure Mom and Dad are taken care of long-term. Estate planning, asset distribution. Y'all know how it is. Proactive, not reactive. Pearl nodded along, like a TV anchor keeping pace with her co-host. Dexter continued, reading each name with a kind of ceremonial weight. Pearl would get the waterfront condo. Her husband was named trustee of some minor family fund. Dexter, obviously, would maintain ownership of the Crow estate and associated lands. Then he closed the binder. That's it? I asked, quiet. He blinked. Oh, sorry. And for Kathy, Mom's scrapbook, and the old upright piano in the study. Even Pearl paused at that one. She shifted in her seat, glanced sideways, unsure of what to say. I smiled. Ah, sentimental value, timeless. Dexter chuckled. Exactly. You've always been more heart than hustle. No one else laughed. Pearl looked down at her hands. Mabel just adjusted her napkin. I didn't let my face move, not a twitch, just nodded. But inside, I was rewinding everything. The broken chair, the diet food, the missed dessert, now the inheritance. It wasn't about objects or money. It was the system. They knew exactly how much I'd done, and exactly how to act like it never happened. People don't need to shout to cut you out. All they need is to assign you the parts no one else wants. A few years back, I offered to help with estate structuring, sent over legal contacts, even pre-reviewed software for asset tracking. Dexter told me, don't worry, you're not that type. He said it with a smile, the kind you use on children pretending to be astronauts. After the meeting, I helped clear plates. Said thank you when Pearl handed me my coat. Mabel hugged me and said, It was so good to see you. Don't be a stranger. Outside, the air had cooled. I slipped into the rental and shut the door softly. My phone rang as I pulled onto the long drive. Rowena. How'd it go? She asked. I looked out the window at the house, the hedges, the whole illusion of order they'd built like it was real. Let's just say, the piano comes with a seat by the toilet. She laughed, quiet and sharp, but something in my voice must have landed different this time. She didn't ask a follow-up, I reached up and adjusted the silver kite pin on my jacket. It caught the dashboard light and flashed back at me. Next time, they'd see the wind change. I was up before the sun. Couldn't sleep. Couldn't even pretend to. So I slipped on my sneakers, wrapped an old scarf around my neck, and stepped out before anyone else stirred. The air still held last night's chill, and the streets looked like they hadn't moved since I left this town. I walked past the old church steps where we used to sit and throw pebbles, the bakery that used to smell like cinnamon and longing, the bench where I read my first business book from the library, checked out under my sister's card because mine had expired. That bench had more faith in me than most people I shared a last name with. Then the corner store came into view. The windows were different, but the shape hadn't changed. We used to huddle there, dreaming. They still sold the same dusty candies behind the counter. I stared at the front awning, thinking to myself, we used to dream here. Now they just decorate those dreams with other people's names. As I passed the mailbox 3 houses down, I spotted Gerald, my father, sitting on the porch with a stack of papers on his lap. He didn't call out, just waved. I waved back. "Morning," he said. "Barely," I replied. He squinted at a sheet in his hand. "Still got that phone bill from back in '09. Remember when you needed help with that?" I stopped. I remembered. I had wired him the money the next day. Every cent. He never cashed the check, just kept the paper. "Yep," I said. "Good times." He nodded like it was a fond memory. To him it probably was, proof I had needed him once. Evidence of my dependence, laminated in his mind like it meant something. I didn't say anything else, just kept walking. By the time I got back, Pearl and Mabel were already in the kitchen. Pearl was flipping bacon with too much cheer in her voice. Mabel had a story ready before I even took my seat. "You remember when Kathy dropped out of college?" she began, eyes bright. "Everyone at church was so shocked. We had to explain it for weeks." Pearl chimed in, smiling too perfectly. "Yeah, people thought she was going through something. But hey, it all worked out in its own weird way, right?" No one asked what I did now. No one asked how I was doing. Just 2 women playing out a story they liked better. One where I was always a little unstable, always one step from collapse. I stirred my coffee. "You know," I said calmly, "some people never outgrow the story they need you to stay in." They ignored that. Mabel wiped her hands on a towel. "Anyway, you want scrambled or sunny side up?" I wanted out, but I wasn't running. Not anymore. Later, I found Gerald out back, pruning something he probably didn't care about. He looked calmer than usual, more himself. "You were always building something," he said, not looking at me. "Remember when you drew up that whole laser lock door idea on napkins?" I nodded. "Still got that somewhere, I think." "You were always drawing, always scribbling, always thinking." I sat beside him. "Then why didn't you believe I could build something real?" He stopped, clipped one leaf, another, then said, "Because I was scared you'd get hurt." I waited. "And your mother, well, she didn't want to encourage it. Said it'd just make you rebel harder. She wanted you to marry someone steady, something safe. So it was never about me, it was always about them, their fears, their image." "I didn't need protection," I said. "I needed belief." He nodded, once, like a man signing a confession. Afterward, I went upstairs to the guest room and opened my laptop. Rowena had sent a folder marked contributions overnight, receipts, contracts, fund transfers, all the quiet work I'd done over the years, backing this family from a distance. I organized everything into a single file. Not for them. For me. Then I pulled out a photo from the side of my bag. Me, 19, in a hoodie, sketching a network layout on a whiteboard. My eyes looked tired, but hungry. If they only remember your worst moment, let your best one speak louder. even if it only speaks to you. I picked up the phone. Rowena, I said. Bump the timeline. I want the helicopter here before dinner. Everyone was busy getting ready for the gala, voices echoing off the walls like we were in a hotel lobby instead of a family home. Pearl was rehearsing her speech out loud. Mabel was arranging floral centerpieces like she'd been personally nominated for sainthood. I slipped away unnoticed, same as always, and ducked into the study. It still smelled like paper and old tobacco, though no one smoked in here anymore. I wandered through a row of filing cabinets, tugged open a drawer labeled Crow Ventures, and flipped through the tabs. One folder caught my eye. Q1 Expansion Plan. Final. I opened it. I knew that code, the algorithm structure, the client flow. It wasn't just familiar, it was mine. 6 years ago, I'd emailed Dexter a beta version of my prototype for feedback, a simple, "Tell me what you think." He never replied. But here it was, reformatted, rebranded, and stamped with "Final Edit, Crow Systems." There was no mention of me, no footnote, no thank you, nothing. And they didn't just mock my work, they monetized it, quietly, completely. I sat down at the desk, my heart not racing but slowing into something colder. He hadn't even changed the variable names. Back in the hallway, I heard laughter, Pearl's shrill and airy tone, Mabel's practiced hush. I tucked the folder under my arm and walked toward the gallery wall in the west hallway, the one they always bragged about during tours. Graduations, weddings, family holidays at the vineyard, Kathy, 12, Kathy, 16, and then, nothing. 15 years of photos, events I had been at, paid for, supported from behind the scenes, and yet, I wasn't in any of them. A fundraiser I personally sponsored, I was listed as anonymous. A wedding I stood in as bridesmaid, I was cropped out. Every image was carefully curated to say one thing: Kathy never mattered. At the end of the hall hung a massive frame, silver-trimmed, lit from above. It showed Pearl and Dexter at a podium, flanked by donors and city officials. Plaque beneath it read, "Crow Foundation Innovation Gala, celebrating visionary leadership. Pearl, brand director. Dexter, founder. Kathy, no mention." I stared at the smiling faces, teeth bared in public joy, and thought, they turned memories into marketing and erased me to make room for their own reflections. I returned to my room and opened my laptop. Rowena had already sent a shared drive. Inside, bank records, tax receipts, foundation start dates. I started pulling together the threads, each donation I'd made in silence, each initiative they'd rebranded. This wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. I needed to see it all laid out, in one place. Just for me. Sometimes you collect receipts not for revenge, but for clarity. To stop gaslighting yourself. As I sorted through folders, I found an old photo of myself. I was 19, hoodie too big, hair tied back, whiteboard behind me covered in early-stage logic diagrams. My eyes were tired, but focused. I printed it and pinned it beside the mirror. Later that evening, while Mabel arranged silverware and Pearl talked centerpieces, I walked into the kitchen, binder in hand. "Hey," I said casually. "Found an old proposal in the study. Looks like the same one Crow Systems is using now?" Dexter didn't even glance up. "Oh, that. You just sent some drafts, right? We assumed it wasn't serious." Pearl added without missing a beat. "You always had a flair for ideas. We just made them practical." Mabel's voice floated in like a shield. "Let's not argue. We're finally all together." I nodded. Didn't argue. Didn't correct. Didn't try to prove. But something shifted. I stopped hoping they'd say my name and started planning how to own the next one they left off. The air outside the gala venue had a gloss to it, like everything was dipped in something slick and performative. Banners flapped along the fencing, each reading Crow Foundation Annual Benefit in oversized cursive, gilded like a wedding invitation. I stood near the curb for a full minute before stepping out of the car, scanning the crowd. Everyone here was dressed to be seen. I came to watch. They hadn't listed me on the press brief, which didn't surprise me anymore. My name wasn't on the donor wall either, but the color scheme, the lighting design, the entire layout, it all mirrored the blueprint I'd sketched and funded privately 2 years ago. They hadn't even changed the slogan. Inside, Dexter was introduced as the visionary behind the evening, while Pearl beamed from the side as the heart of the outreach. I took a seat in the second row, not by invitation, just by default. No one stopped me, but no one acknowledged me either. I sat still through speeches, applause, soft jazz playing in the background. They paraded around like they built it all with their bare hands. Sometimes silence isn't absence, it's erasure. Halfway through, a slideshow rolled across the screen. Photos of meetings, smiling board members, donor checks. Then my face appeared, just once. I was listed as freelance advisor. No title, no role, no equity. I didn't flinch. Someone at my table leaned over and whispered, "That's not you, is it?" I looked up, smiled. I guess I just look like someone who used to matter. He gave an awkward laugh. I didn't return it. When Mabel took the stage, she lifted a glass and called Dexter, the future of our family's name. Not a soul blinked. It was just understood. As soon as the lights dimmed, I pulled out my phone and typed one line to Rowena. "Send me every version of the original gala deck. Tonight." Back at the house, the quiet almost felt staged. Everyone had gone to their rooms. I was still in my blazer, makeup barely smudged, when there was a soft knock at my door. The housekeeper handed me an envelope. "Your father asked me to give this to you. Said it was long overdue." The handwriting was unmistakable. Gerald's block letters, shaky at the ends. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened it slowly, like whatever was inside had a heartbeat. It was a letter, almost 10 years old. A full page, handwritten. No typos, no edits. He wrote about watching me work late in the garage, about the night he found me fixing the old computer tower with a paperclip and duct tape. He wrote that he saw my mind moving even when my mouth didn't. That he always knew I had something inside me bigger than the town could hold. And then he apologized. He said he let fear make him small. That when I dropped out of college, he wanted to support me, but Mabel told him it would encourage rebellion. So he stayed quiet, played his role, smiled through his shame. "I believed in you then," he wrote. "I just wasn't brave enough to show it." I didn't cry, not from sorrow, but from clarity. It wasn't all in my head. The distance, the silence, the omissions, they were real, constructed, protected, and now broken. I laid the letter next to my laptop. On the screen was the presentation I'd been refining for 2 days. Financial receipts, licensing records, photos of meetings where I was erased. It wasn't a revenge deck. It was a truth archive. I added a final slide, scanned the letter, centered it on a blank white page. This, I thought, isn't about proving anything. It's about preserving what they tried to erase. I stood, walked to the window. The night was quiet except for one distant sound. Helicopter blades, slow at first, then sharper. I clipped the silver kite pin to my lapel and waited. The house smelled like bacon and misplaced pleasantries. They were already seated when I walked into the dining room. Pearl poured orange juice like she was hosting a brunch segment. Mabel smiled with her usual polished concern. Dexter looked relaxed, too relaxed, like a man who thought the worst was behind him. "Morning," I said. "Great job last night," Dexter offered, not looking up. "Big turnout. People loved the space." I nodded, took the empty seat at the end. No one asked if I wanted coffee. Pearl unfolded a guest list for the upcoming luncheon and slid it toward Mabel. Press will be there. Board reps. Some donors. I scanned it, not looking for my name, just confirming what I already knew. It wasn't there. Mabel turned toward me, voice soft, as if she were handing me a favor. You might be more comfortable attending as support. Support? I asked. She blinked. Well, yes. I mean, you've been so gracious helping behind the scenes. You don't have to worry about speaking or being in photos. I set down my fork. And what exactly am I supporting today? The silence didn't last long. Pearl cleared her throat and changed the topic to hors d'oeuvres. Mabel asked about flowers. Dexter picked up his phone. I smiled. That was the last line they'd draw for me. After breakfast, I headed upstairs. I passed Silas in the hallway near the office, laptop in hand. Working on the press deck? I asked. He hesitated. Just polishing slides. Mind if I take a look? He opened it, reluctant. I glanced down. Third slide, lower right corner. Kathy Moore, independent consultant, not affiliated with Crow Foundation. I pointed. May I see that one again? Silas shifted his weight. Oh, that's just a draft. Formatting thing. We'll clean it up. Of course it was. Just like the checklists, the missed invites, the cropped photos. Appreciate you showing me, I said, and kept walking. Sometimes exclusion doesn't scream. It signs your name in lowercase, footnotes you like a typo. But it's no accident. It's perfectly formatted. It's always intentional. Later that day, Pearl gathered the group in the parlor, announcing big news. Oliver just received a merit scholarship, full ride for the next semester. Everyone clapped. Mabel gasped. Dexter patted Silas on the back. It's all those connections your husband's been building, Mabel said, glowing. I stood still. The name of the scholarship rang in my ears. It was one I created under my foundation, quietly, anonymously. I'd asked Rowena to keep my identity off the records, fearing backlash from Pearl. Dexter beamed. This family lifts itself up, always has. I didn't say a word, didn't crack, but the weight of it, watching them collect praise for something I built in silence, settled in my chest like bricks. They didn't just take the gift, they wrapped it, re-tagged it, and handed it to themselves. Now they treat kindness like currency, spend it, then pretend it was always theirs. That night, I sat in the guest room, still in the same blazer from breakfast. I didn't need new clothes to change form. I needed one last push. I opened the presentation again. Slide 22, proof of the donation route, timeline, source. Slide 23, screenshot of an old email chain from Silas, time-stamped, crediting me as the primary software architect. Below it, I typed a sentence in black font on a white slide. This was my last quiet warning. The next will be louder. I saved the file, closed the lid, clipped the kite pin back onto my lapel, walked to the window. Let them keep polishing their image. I was about to let the truth land like thunder. The backyard looked like something out of a magazine. Round tables, soft jazz drifting from hidden speakers, linen napkins folded like swans. The sun was high enough to keep everything looking pleasant but not so bright it made anyone sweat. Pearl planned it that way. I took the same seat I always did, furthest from the head table, closest to the catering tent. Dexter lifted his wine glass and grinned. Don't worry, Kathy, he said, loud enough for heads to turn. We saved you a spot. You still Uber everywhere, right? A few chuckles floated around. Pearl tried not to laugh, but failed. Even Mabel smirked, as if it was all just harmless teasing. I looked toward the sky. Let them have their moment, I thought. I'll give them something worth remembering. I folded my napkin neatly and placed it on my plate. That's when I heard it. Low at first, then louder. The soft rumble of blades cutting through air. It wasn't thunder, not yet. The glasses on the table started to tremble. One of the centerpieces tipped slightly, and napkins fluttered like warning flags. Mabel looked up. Pearl squinted. Dexter rose to his feet. Eloise clapped her hands. "Is that for us?" I stood without rushing, straightened the lapel of my blazer, adjusted the silver kite pin. "That's mine," I said. And then I walked toward the lawn. The helicopter descended just past the garden hedges, sleek, black, and gold, with the logo of my company bold across the side. No ambiguity, no doubt. The rotor wash sent petals scattering and wine glasses tilting. Nobody laughed now. Rowena stepped out first, tablet in hand, dressed like she walked out of a tech press release. She didn't speak, just opened the door and waited. Mabel clutched her pearls like they could ground her. Pearl looked like she might faint. Dexter. He looked like he'd just remembered something important and far too late. As I approached, I heard footsteps beside me. Eloise. "Aunt Kathy," she said softly, tugging at my sleeve. "Do you really own all this?" I stopped and knelt beside her. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "And I built it. Quietly. Fully." She looked down, then back up at me. "Then, why do they act like you don't?" I smiled. It wasn't bitter, just tired. Because sometimes people only see what they're comfortable believing. Rowena called from the door. "We're ready." I stood, gave Eloise one last look. "Don't let anyone decide your story for you, okay?" She nodded. I climbed in. As we lifted off, I looked down one last time. Dexter was still standing, arms limp at his sides. Pearl was gripping her chair. Mabel hadn't moved. I didn't rise to show off. I rose to remind them what rising looks like. In the air, Rowena handed me the press brief for the following morning. I reviewed the slides. Clean, direct, no apologies. Then I paused on the last one, a photo of me and Eloise at the Innovation Lab, both of us smiling in lab coats too big for her arms. "Make that the first slide," I said. "People need to know where legacy really starts." The helicopter banked left. I looked back once, not with longing, not for closure, just to confirm what I already knew. They thought they'd written me out. I was just about to write the ending. By late afternoon, the dining room had been transformed into something that looked official. Legal pads, glass pitchers of water, a projector set up like a courtroom. I sat in silence while they arranged papers they never intended me to touch. Dexter stood at the head of the table, beaming with self-appointed authority. "The gala was a massive success," he began. "And I think it's only right we ride that momentum into real planning." He glanced toward Pearl, who passed around a packet, 10 pages thick, color-coded, financial contributors to the Family Care Trust. I flipped to the chart with names and amounts. My row was blank. Pearl spoke before I could. "We weren't sure where you stood financially. We didn't want to pressure you." I looked up. "That was thoughtful of you," I said, voice low. "Let's fix the record." No one blinked. I reached down and pulled a navy folder from my tote, slim, clean, sealed with a magnetic clasp. I laid it flat in the center of the table. Inside were 3 things: transfer receipts from my foundation, screenshots showing me listed as the majority funder of the health plan, and a notarized document confirming I'd designed the model they were now pretending had always been theirs. Rowena entered the room without a word, placed a USB stick on the table, and stood behind me like she'd been there all along. "That," I said calmly, "contains copies of original IP registration, full architectural drafts, and audio from last year's planning call, specifically the part where Dexter asked me to remain anonymous so the branding would align with him." Dexter didn't speak. Pearl looked down. Mabel sipped water like it would help her swallow what was happening. I didn't raise my voice. I just let the papers speak. But then Dexter muttered, almost too low to catch. She's just a guest here anyway. The air tightened. Pearl's eyes darted toward him. Mabel dropped her glass back on its base too hard. I turned to Eloise, who was sitting at the far end with a coloring book she hadn't touched since I walked in. Would a guest build the house you're sitting in? I asked her, not cold, not cruel, just steady. She blinked and looked back at me, no answer needed. I stood, adjusted the kite pin on my lapel. You didn't just underestimate me, I said. You rewrote the truth and expected me to nod along. I took 3 steps toward the door, then stopped. I'm not leaving, I added, turning back. I'm just changing the locks on the version of me you thought you owned. Nobody followed. Dexter began flipping through his packet, mumbling about errors, miscommunication, mixed-up files. Pearl tried to redirect. Mabel stayed quiet for once. I sat back down, didn't argue, just waited. Rowena handed out fresh binders, mine, each with accurate names, roles, and full contribution records. Mabel cleared her throat. Can we speak privately, dear? I didn't look at her. Later, I said. After you sit with this. She nodded. So did the silence. They stayed seated, Dexter chewing on the inside of his cheek, Pearl pretending to read, Mabel clasping her hands. I stared out the window. The sky wasn't angry. It was just clear. I didn't bring down the house. I just turned the lights on. The morning after, the house felt like it had been drained of air. No one was moving, no silver clinking, no cheerful toast popping in the kitchen, just silence. I slipped on my sweater, stepped into the hallway, and passed by the dining room. The documents from the day before were still scattered across the table. My folder still open, the signatures still untouched. Mabel was already sitting at the head of the table. She hadn't noticed me at first. Her fingers were tracing the edges of the binder, page by page, like she was reading a book she didn't realize she'd been written out of. She looked up slowly, and I saw something new in her eyes. Not guilt, something softer, confused. I didn't know the half of it, she said. I stepped into the room. No, you didn't want to. We stood there for a moment, no voices raised, no accusations, just truth, clean and still. She nodded. I suppose. We built something, and then locked you out of the house. I said nothing. After a while, she asked, So, what happens next? I looked her in the eye. That depends on what we're willing to rebuild, but not with the same blueprints. She didn't speak again. By the time I made it to the kitchen, Pearl was already pouring coffee. She barely looked up, mumbling something about Dexter not coming down. He's processing, she said. What she meant was, he'd been exposed. And there was no spinning it this time. I didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. I went upstairs, opened my laptop, and typed out a memo. It was short, formal, a request to remove my name and likeness from all future marketing tied to the family brand. I didn't want to be Crow adjacent anymore, not because I hated them, because I was finally done renting space in their narrative. My phone buzzed with a message from Dexter. 2 words. You win. I stared at it for a few seconds, then locked the screen and slid the phone away. Some victories don't need applause. In the garden, I found Eloise hunched over a notebook, drawing something with intense focus. She looked up, face lighting up when she saw me. Will you still visit? She asked. Yes, I said. Not for the house, for you. I handed her a tiny velvet box. Inside was a smaller version of my kite pin. You don't have to fly away to matter, I told her. But if you do, let no one clip your wings. She nodded solemnly, like she understood more than she should have to at that age. Later that afternoon, Pearl asked if we could walk. She didn't apologize. She never said sorry. But halfway through the walk, she muttered, "I didn't know how much of you we chose not to see." I let the silence sit between us before answering. "It's not about seeing me now," I said. "It's about seeing better next time." I didn't promise to stay in touch. I didn't say we'd talk more. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I owed her a version of me she'd approve of. When I returned to my room, I packed slowly. No rush, no noise. My hands moved like I wasn't leaving anything behind, just moving something forward. The walls felt different, less heavy, less haunted. Downstairs, Rowena waited by the car. She handed me a folder, press inquiries, updates on the scholarship fund, a thank you note from an anonymous donor who said they'd been moved by my speech. Mabel walked me to the front door. No dramatic pause, no trembling goodbye, just a soft squeeze of the hand and, "Your father would have been proud. I just wish I'd been braver." I nodded, and then I stepped outside. The air was warmer than it had been all week. As I walked to the car, I didn't look back. They'll rewrite their history. I'll live mine.